musicians. We were tearing up some hot swing music in the orchestra. Gail over there was swinging her fans.
For decades, fans believed they knew Curly, the lovable clown whose wild spins and silly noises made the world laugh. But in the final week of his life, Moe Howard, the boss of the Stooges himself, admitted a truth he had hidden for years. It wasn't about fame or fortune or even the act that made them legends. It was about a brother, a secret, and a burden that never left him. What did Moe finally confess when the cameras were gone? And why did he wait until the very end to say it? Brooklyn boys, one dream. Brooklyn at the turn of the 20th century was not the playground of movie stars. It was a patchwork of working-class neighborhoods, crowded with immigrant families chasing stability. Among them was the Horwitz family, Jewish immigrants struggling to make ends meet. Their home was noisy, modest, and full of siblings, 5 boys in total. In the middle of this was Moses Harry Horwitz, born June 19, 1897. The world would know him as Moe Howard. Even as a child, Moe carried the burden of responsibility. He wasn't the tallest or strongest, but he was fiercely protective. Teachers remembered him standing up to bullies, always with one eye on his younger brothers. In a family that had little, loyalty and grit were the real currency. Among those younger brothers was Jerome Lester Horwitz, born October 22, 1903. 6 years separated them, but their bond was immediate. Jerome, nicknamed Babe in the family, grew into the sweet-natured boy who could make people laugh without trying. He was clumsy, mischievous, and full of innocent charm, the exact qualities that years later would become the essence of Curly. While Moe carried the role of the serious older brother, Jerome carried something different, an ability to turn any situation into light. It wasn't rehearsed, and it wasn't forced. He just radiated humor in a way that could disarm even the sternest adult. The brothers grew up in an era when cinema was still magic. Nickelodeons and neighborhood theaters offered escape from factory jobs and crowded tenements. Moe, restless in school, often skipped classes to watch Charlie Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, and Buster Keaton. He studied every gag, every fall, every twitch of expression. Jerome sometimes tagged along, mimicking what he saw. On sidewalks, he would stumble intentionally, bark like a dog, or squeal in high-pitched nonsense, routines that would one day make him a star. But at this stage, it was just Jerome entertaining the neighbors, while Moe dreamed of stages larger than Brooklyn. By the time he was a teen, Moe's passion for performing pretty well quashed any real appetite for academics he might have had. Getting expelled from school was quite a gamble when everybody in the Horwitz family was already on a financial tightrope. The tiny roles he was getting in amateur theater work seemed like words of encouragement. This was understood by Jenny. She respected Moe's drive even when she could give nothing to them. For Jenny, when all was said and done, Moe was the determined brother who whispered to the rest of the family in fervor. Jerome was the heart, gentle in spirit, who could soothe their hardest days. In hindsight, Moe's intensity and Curly's innocence held their family together. Only that force and simplicity would someday combine with what had already been forged as the cornerstone of one of the best-liked comedy acts Hollywood has ever known. But at those innocent ages, it was just 2 mischief-making souls who deeply cemented their bond through shared life experiences and humor. Moe became the guard, and Jerome was the king of gags. Both together, intent on living life, moved in synchronization with the eternal aspect of life. One brother pushing forth, and the other one laughingly tagging along. It must be understood that this bond between them was not just professional, but personal, even deep inside the mind of Curly, where Moe was an additional father figure, protector of a later stage, and sometimes a ruthless boss. Jerome was not just an actor. He was Moe's youngest brother, who had bonded with him very well since childhood. That means he made him feel responsible for this brother till their very last days together, making it a bond that could explain all the glory and guilt that would ever be with them for the rest of their lives. Brooklyn gave them grit. It gave them resilience. And it gave them the spark of something unique, that special brand of comedy that would eventually be born on street corners and reach out to vaudeville stages to become immortalized on the silver screen. But with their ambitions moving beyond the boroughs, the question lingers. Would even Moe's discipline and Jerome's wild innocence be able to endure the feral world of professional entertainment? The answer arrived in the 1930s when Jerome shaved his head, stepped on stage as Curly, and instantly became the star no one saw coming. Curly is born. By the early 1930s, Moe Howard had already carved out his space in vaudeville. He was part of Ted Healy's act, Ted Healy and his Stooges, alongside his brother Shemp Howard and violinist-turned-comedian Larry Fine. Moe's stage identity was clear: the sharp bowl cut, the dominating voice, the bossy slap-and-poke ringleader who kept the chaos moving. But when Shemp decided to leave the act in 1932 to pursue his own career, Moe faced a critical problem. Who could fill that gap? The most unlikely candidate was his youngest brother, Jerome. Offstage, Jerome was shy, soft-spoken, and far from polished. He carried himself with a kind of awkward grace, but he had no professional training and little stage experience. Moe worried his brother's natural silliness might not translate under the pressure of performing for demanding audiences. Jerome, however, was determined. He wanted to prove himself, and he wasn't afraid to transform to do it. Jerome's solution was radical. He shaved off his full head of thick hair and his mustache, giving himself the bald, childlike look that would define him forever. When he walked on stage for the first time with his new appearance, the effect was electric. The audience laughed before he even opened his mouth. And when he did, barking like a dog, squealing in a high-pitched "nyuk, nyuk, nyuk," and spinning like a human top, the laughter erupted into chaos. Curly Howard was born that night. Almost overnight, Curly became the heart of the act. Audiences adored him. He wasn't just funny, he was unpredictable. Directors quickly realized that Curly didn't need scripted lines. He was an improvisational genius who could turn accidents into comic brilliance. If he tripped, it became a gag. If he stammered, it turned into a routine. One Columbia Pictures memo later noted, "Curly is a genius who needs no direction. He can have the whole set in stitches with just a shrug." The three Stooges, Moe, Larry, and Curly, actually broke away from Ted Healy and signed with Columbia Pictures in 1934. That was their turning point. Under the Columbia banner, in a short time, the Stooges became the Three Stooges, and short films depicting the antics were quick staples of Depression-era entertainment. The studio demanded a brutal pace, either 8 or 9 short films per year, each in less than a week. But the formula worked. There was a long enough period for audiences wanting relief from economic despair, when the violent slapstick and outrageous improvisations of the Stooges provided perfect escape. Curly was the prime mover behind it. His childish innocence, along with his wild energy, made him irresistible. Adults laughed at his absurd gags. Children imitated his sounds and movements, chasing a hat across a room, bouncing around like a spring, or inventing gibberish on the spot. Curly gives to the act a heartbeat no one else can replicate. Moe played the tough leader, Larry, the befuddled middleman, but Curly was the one who made the machine explode with laughter. Moe was still in dual occupation on camera and off. On camera, the bully was behind the scenes negotiating with hard-nosed Columbia producer Harry Cohn for better treatment. Curly was of course, seen as the comedian in the act, though Moe thought differently. To him, his younger brother was the one who kept the audience coming. It was Curly's unpredictability, from his ability to turn nonsense into art, that distinguished the Stooges from all other slapstick acts in existence. By the late 1930s, the Three Stooges became a household name. Their shorts ran in theaters all over the country, often as the main attraction ahead of a feature. Kids shouted Curly's catchphrases on the playgrounds. Grown-ups repeated their routines at work. Curly wasn't just funny, he was a cultural institution. But even as the fame grew wider and wider, Moe could not help but notice something unsettling. Curly gave the world eternal laughter, but off-screen, he was still little brother Jerome, shy, insecure, and unprepared for the physical and emotional outrage of never-ending celebrity. And as the spotlight grew brighter, the cracks began to show, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. The pace that eats you. By the early 1940s, the Three Stooges had achieved what most comedy acts could only dream of. They were household names. Their short films ran before feature pictures in nearly every theater across America. Curly was the undeniable star, adored for his childlike chaos and unpredictable genius. To fans, he seemed unstoppable, an endless fountain of gags, noises, and pratfalls. But what audiences never saw was the cost of that laughter. Columbia Pictures demanded 8 to 10 shorts per year, each filmed in less than a week. The pace was brutal. Scripts were rushed, sets recycled, and actors pushed to deliver slapstick at breakneck speed. Retakes were rare, and mistakes were often left in if they got a laugh. The workload left little time for rest. For Moe, who had always been the group's organizer and protector, the strain was worrying. For Curly, who carried the physical burden of being the centerpiece, it was devastating. By his mid-30s, Curly began to change. His once agile body grew heavier. Years of heavy drinking and late-night parties added weight and fatigue. His movements slowed, his timing faltered, and the boundless energy that once seemed effortless began to wane. On set, crew members noticed troubling lapses. Curly would forget lines he once delivered instinctively or stare blankly in the middle of a scene as if unsure where he was. Sometimes he slurred his words or drifted into confusion. What fans dismissed as Curly being silly was, in reality, the creeping onset of serious health issues. Moe noticed every slip. He had spent his whole life shielding his younger brother, but now the problem was larger than a schoolyard bully. It was the machine of Hollywood itself. On more than one occasion, Moe redirected scenes in real time to cover Curly's lapses. If Curly froze, Moe improvised, steering the action until his brother could catch up. To the audience, it looked like part of the act. To Moe, it was a desperate attempt to protect Curly's dignity. Moe had always been the silent hope behind the scenes, pleading with the Columbia executives for Curly to be given some leniency. He begged the head of the studio, Harry Cohn, to give the sick Curly a break so that he could rest and recover. In a handwritten letter retrieved decades later, Moe had warned, "Jerome cannot keep going at this pace. He's exhausted, and I fear we will lose him if you don't act." The appeal fell on deaf ears. At Columbia, the Stooges were treated like expendable workhorses. If one man happened to be out of order, a substitute would be found instead. Therefore, the schedule moved on relentlessly and mercilessly. The war years only served to increase demand. Audiences in search of diversion from the grim realities of World War II saw Columbia tightening the leash on the Stooges to get those belly laughs shipped. The trio's shorts for soldiers on leave and families at home became quite a staple. But the laughter, all at the expense of Curly. With every pratfall, every spin, every improvisation, Curly's health was just that much closer to the edge. By 1944, denial was impossible. As in shorts such as If a Body Meets a Body, fans began noticing that something was off. Curly's once bellowing voice sounded weaker than ever. His energy had dipped, and his timing became slack. To most audiences, he was still funny, but to Moe, every laugh was a knife in the gut. He could see that brilliance was no longer instinct, it was survival. Curly forced himself through the pain. He performed out of obligation. In a 1973 interview, Larry Fine would reveal, "We tried to hide Curly's condition. Moe told us to do whatever we could to make him look okay on screen, but deep down we knew he was in bad shape. To anyone out in public, there was still the lovable clown. Behind the curtains, the man was falling apart. Moe held the guilt inside. He knew that the schedule was an extortion on his brother, but he knew also that the act would collapse without Curly. What kind of choice should an elder brother ever have to make? Save the family business, or save the brother who gave it life? That impossible balance shattered in 1946, when the cameras rolled on what was supposed to be just another comedy short, and instead captured the day Curly's career came to a sudden, heartbreaking end. The day everything stopped. Curly had suffered a massive stroke. He was only 42 years old. In an instant, the act's brightest flame had been extinguished, not by death, but by a cruel twist of fate that stripped him of the very gifts that made him beloved. The damage was devastating. Curly survived, but the stroke left him partially paralyzed. His speech slurred. Curly became a star performer one moment and a hospital patient the next. Days filled with the laughter and applause of thousands were replaced by a life of rehabilitation and constant care. The same man could once raise the merriment of the entire hall. Now, he struggled to raise himself off a chair, but Moe's ever far forsakes him. Regardless of all the fuss concerning maintaining the show alive, he still paid regular visits to Curly, bringing along old reels of shorts to play at his bedside. For Curly, these moments would oftentimes be spent smiling with flickering images and soft laughter at his antics. For Moe, those fleeting smiles were as much a consolation, the proof that the brother he knew still lingered somewhere inside. But alas, a reminder of all that had been lost as well. The stroke was more than the final curtain for Curly. It heralded the day Moe discovered that the very machine that had driven their commercial success was also mortifying. The giddy pace, the unending demands for laughter, had left waste in the form of the one person who made it possible. This was the cost that no contract ever mentioned, the tragedy concealed behind the comedy. But the stroke wasn't the end of Curly's story. What followed was a long, heartbreaking decline, a slow goodbye that forced Moe to carry both the act and his guilt alone. A long, quiet goodbye. After the stroke in 1946, Curly Howard's life changed forever. The man who had once been the heartbeat of the Three Stooges now faced a slow and painful decline. At first, Curly refused to believe his career was over. He asked Moe when he could return to the set, convinced that with enough rest he'd bounce back. But Moe, who had seen the truth with his own eyes, knew that day would never come. Curly's body and mind had been permanently damaged. The years that followed were heartbreaking. Curly suffered additional strokes in the late 1940s, each one stripping more of his vitality. His speech became harder to understand, his movements more limited, his once quick mind clouded with confusion. At times, he didn't recognize old friends. At other times, he seemed trapped between childlike sweetness and sudden bursts of frustration. Doctors diagnosed severe brain damage, but treatments of the era offered little help. For Moe, the transformation was devastating. He had always been the protector, the older brother who shielded Jerome from the world. Still, Moe never gave up on him. He visited regularly, often bringing reels of old shorts to play at his bedside. For brief moments, Curly would laugh at the antics on screen, at the man he once was. For Moe, those smiles were bittersweet. They proved Curly's spark still flickered, but they also reminded him of everything the stroke had taken. Curly's personal life was no less turbulent. In 1947, he married Valerie Newman, his fourth wife, who stayed with him until the end. Valerie provided stability and care when Curly could no longer care for himself. Friends recalled visits where Curly alternated between moments of warmth, where the man who once made millions laugh seemed lost in his own world. The last time Curly was filmed for the screen was in the picture Hold That Lion. It was the only film that had all three Howard brothers, Moe, Shemp, and Curly, together. He does a cameo appearance by appearing on the scene, sitting quietly, topped with full-length hair, and has a somewhat delicate smile. To the viewers, this was a surprise. But for those who knew him, this was a painful confirmation. The vibrant performer, who once spun like a whirlwind, is now all that's left of him. Moe later revealed that seeing Curly in that cameo broke his heart more than it uplifted him. Curly deteriorated so fast that by the year 1951, he had to be confined for long-term care. For a better part of his last year, family and close friends likewise visited, but every meeting carried the bearing of knowledge that the end was near. Jerome Curly Howard died on January 18, 1952, at the age of 48. The world reacted with shock. Fans who remembered his energy and innocence couldn't reconcile it with such a quiet, tragic ending. Newspaper obituaries celebrated his genius, but most refrained from speaking of the pain that took him there. For the public, Curly was frozen in time, the lovable clown. To Moe, it was a wound that would never heal. He later confessed he had been mourning his brother for years, long before the final farewell. With Curly's death, an era came to an end, and the three Stooges lost their heart. Moe and Larry wanted to keep Shemp, but according to Moe, it was never the same. And while the world moved forward, Moe carried the weight of that guilt until his final days, when the truth he had hidden for decades finally spilled out. Moe's burden. After Curly died in 1952, the three Stooges carried on. Moe, Larry, and Shemp resumed work almost immediately, driven by studio contracts and the unrelenting demand for comedy shorts. Later, Joe Besser and Curly Joe DeRita, keeping the franchise alive for new audiences. On the surface, Moe continued as he always had, snapping orders on screen, poking eyes, and playing the stern ringleader. But behind that stern exterior, the weight of guilt pressed harder with every passing year. Television revived the Stooges' old shorts in the late 1950s, breathing new life into their popularity. For an entire generation of children, Curly became a brand new discovery, his antics every bit as fresh as they had been in theaters 2 decades earlier. Kids across America imitated his "Nayuk, Nayuk, Nayuk" and high-pitched yelps. Curly's legacy was alive and thriving, even though the man himself was gone. For fans, this was a miracle of entertainment. For Moe, it was bittersweet. Each rerun reminded him of the joy Curly brought to millions, and the pain that joy had cost him privately. Moe tried to protect Curly's memory fiercely. In the 1950s, he helped found Normandy Productions, a company designed to safeguard the Stooges' film rights. When advertisers came calling with lucrative offers to plaster Curly's face on products, Moe often refused. "Curly isn't for sale," he wrote in one letter. "He's an artist, not a product." He wanted his brother remembered for the genius he was, not reduced to a marketing tool. To the outside world, Moe was a savvy businessman, but to those close to him, it was clear his protectiveness came from something deeper, a desperate need to preserve the brother he could no longer save in life. His friends thought he merely held the publicity responsible. In his secret heart, Moe accepted a heavier burden. Curly had been fading in health for at least a few years before the stroke. Moe had seen the weight gain, the drinking, the exhaustion. However, he had asked Columbia Pictures to let Curly rest. Just as surely, he had pushed his brother to work when work was the last thing that Jerome needed. "Making people laugh while my brother was dying before me," Moe admitted heavily to a friend. It was a blessing and a curse to him. On the one hand, the act brought fame and stability to his family. On the other hand, it took more from them than any of them ought to have given. His last years would be colored by the controversy. The comic trio gained a second lease on life, celebrated through TV reruns, live performances, and acceptance by children who had idolized Curly. Parents who had grown up with the Stooges brought their own children. Moe Howard watched all the children laugh at Curly's antics, smiling with them while his insides twisted in pain. Each cheer for Curly was a knife in the back, a reminder of how the act had consumed his brother, leaving Moe to pick up the pieces. By the 1970s, Moe's failing health saw the toll of smoking catching up with him. He was afflicted with lung cancer, which had a hurried progression. Friends and family said that as the days passed and his strength slipped away, he would talk more and more about Jerome. Nurses at Cedars-Sinai remembered him whispering the name Jerome, as if it were a touchstone across time for his brother. His daughter Joan said his life seemed to brighten when old home movies were shown in his hospital room, only to dim with tears moments later. Even in the face of his own impending death, it was evident that Moe became preoccupied with the brother he could not save. For the public, Moe would always be boss Stooge, the one in charge, the unforgiving leader of the trio. But in the end, it slipped. Behind it was the man haunted by guilt and regret, proud of his brother's gift, but crushed by the knowledge that fame had ruined him. And it was, in those final days, with death at his own door, that Moe finally broke his silence, confessing what he had carried in secret for decades. Final week. Final words. By May 1975, Moe Howard was a frail man. Years of smoking had caught up with him, and doctors at Cedars-Sinai Hospital diagnosed him with terminal lung cancer. The once fiery leader of the Three Stooges, sharp haircut, commanding voice, quick temper, was bedridden, his body weak, but his mind still alert. Family and close friends gathered, bringing reels of old shorts to project in his hospital room. Nurses recalled the surreal sight of a dying man watching his younger self slap, poke, and shout across the screen. What struck observers most was Moe's reaction whenever Curly appeared. His eyes lit up, his lips curled into a faint smile, then quickly dimmed into tears. His daughter Joan remembered her father whispering "Jerome" under his breath, as if speaking to his brother rather than the character. In those final days, the line between stage and life, between Curly and Jerome, blurred completely for Moe. For several generations, Moe had always remained tight-lipped about Curly's real plight. He let everyone who adored Curly keep him in their thoughts as a lovable clown, all the while never marring that image with the glitter of truth concerning his distress. On the threshold of his death, however, he let the secret out. To the family gathered around his sickbed, he stated that Curly was not the person who entered the hearts of audiences. The laughter hid loneliness, sickness, and bitterness. Moe confessed that his brother had given everything to comedy and that he himself had felt guilty ever since. Curly thought he could carry on, Moe said one night. I pushed him. I thought the act required him, and it did. But it cost him his life. We all laughed, and he was dying inside. Those who heard it say he hadn't rehearsed those words, but spoke them raw, the release of an older brother's burden at last. He spoke with a heavy heart, saying that it was not enough for his dear friend Curly to be remembered only as a genius of comedy. Moe wanted him recognized as one who paid dearly for the happiness he gave. That is, Jerome Horwitz, a name that evoked silliness and pratfalls, but one that also belonged to a painfully shy and sweet-natured boy trapped within an unforgiving, profit-driven motion picture industry. First and foremost, Moe wanted all to know that Curly was well-loved by his family, by his brothers, and especially by him. Moe Howard died on May 4, 1975, at the age of 77. The last days of his life hung on images of Curly flickering on a wall and laughter from ages past. That confession rebranded Curly. Fans could no longer see him as the silly clown with the squeaky voice. They now saw him as a tragedy and comedy, a man whose brilliance carried the unseen burden of his work. Thanks for watching. If Curly's story moved you, give this video a like to keep their legacy alive. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think was Curly's greatest gift to the world? Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss more untold stories behind the legends of comedy and film. And when you're done here, click on the next video on your screen for another chapter you won't want to miss.